Final item of business today is a members' business debate on motion number 5260 in the name of Bruce Crawford on the Leprosy-Mission-Scotland. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put. I would invite those members who wish to speak in the debate to press the request to speak buttons now or as soon as possible. Mr Crawford, if you are ready, 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'd like to thank all of those, a good number of my colleagues who signed this motion for debate this evening and those who are participating in debate this evening or even just here to listen. But I'd like to open the debate this evening by very much welcoming Linda Todd, the staff and the volunteers from the Leprosy-Mission-Scotland, based in my constituency of Stirling, to this important debate in Parliament this evening. The staff and the many volunteers from the Stirling office do a remarkable job, and during my visits to their premises I have always been hugely impressed by their compassion, their commitment and enthusiasm, as I know too has Anne Maguire, the local MP. The fantastic work carried out by the organisation is supported by over 4,000 individuals and 350 churches and groups. However, looking more widely, on the 27th of January 2013, more than 100 countries around the world will mark World Leprosy Day. World Leprosy Day falls on the anniversary of the death of Mahatma Gandhi, a human being who showed true compassion for people affected by leprosy worldwide. Gandhi did not just simply preach to people that they should help those afflicted by the disease, but he was also personally involved in the work. This year, World Leprosy Day is celebrated its 59th year. Meanwhile, the Leprosy-Mission-Scotland continues to bring healing and justice to people who are affected by the disease in around 30 countries in Africa, in Asia and around the Pacific. It is the biggest and oldest organisation specialising in the causes and consequences of leprosy worldwide. They are well known and respected, not only by local communities, but also by the large established agencies working in international development. It currently funds projects in Angola, Bangladesh, India, Myanmar, Nepal, Nigeria and South Sudan, and thank goodness for its work. The disabilities leprosy causes currently affects around 4 million people worldwide, with around 10 million people still living disadvantaged lives as a result of the disease. Today, between 600 and 700 people will be diagnosed as having leprosy. That's one person every 2 minutes. But it's not all bad news, because over the past 20 years, more than 14 million people have been cured of leprosy, and it's been eliminated from 119 countries. Today, however, according to the World Health Organization, over half the newly reported cases are in India, with high levels still found in countries such as Bangladesh, Brazil, China, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Madagascar, Mozambique, Myanmar, Nepal, Nigeria, Sri Lanka, Philippines, Sudan, Tanzania and Timor-Leste. Now, read that out, because that just shows you the scale of the problem that still exists. But as we know, leprosy can now be cured permanently with a 6 to 12-month course of multi-drug therapy. Early diagnosis and treatment can prevent the spiral of physical, social and psychological despair which many people can find themselves plunged into. However, many cases still go undetected each year, particularly if you live in a rural and remote place where even the most basic health care is limited. Yet to cure and care for someone with leprosy for a year costs as little as 40 pence a day or £12 a month. So the Leprosy-Mission-Scotland works hard to raise the resources to help transform the lives of people affected by leprosy, taking people affected from rejection to acceptance and from poverty to economic independence. It is a truly global fellowship with its ultimate goal to eradicate the causes and consequences of leprosy. Linda Todd, the Chief Executive of the Leprosy-Mission-Scotland, visited South Sudan in September. And shockingly, Linda was able to tell me that if the mission returns to this area of South Sudan, that will be the first organisation to do so. The Leprosy-Mission-Scotland has rightly made it their aim to return and help the people they met. In 2010, the Leprosy Mission was awarded 3 years of funding from the Scottish Government South Asia Development Programme, totalling over £199,000. The funding has been used to fund a project in Chittagong and Bangladesh, transforming the lives of leprosy sufferers in hill districts of Chittagong. You know, leprosy is a cruel, cruel disease which affects the poorest in society, particularly women, robbing people not only of their physical health and well-being, but often of their most basic entitlements. Fear, prejudice and superstition in many communities mean that people affected by leprosy don't just have to cope with the effects of the disease itself, but also the stigma attached to the disease, stigmatisation and alienation from their families and communities, which form the fabric of their lives, adds to their devastation. As a former leprosy sufferer said, leprosy is a ruthless thief which turns off all the lights before you notice there is an intruder. Then, in the total blackout it viciously created, it robs you of every single irreplaceable treasure you possess. So in closing, Presiding Officer, on behalf of all of my MSP colleagues, can I thank from the bottom of my heart the Leprosy Mission Scotland for all of the hard work and for helping to remind us, with the right resources and investment, we can achieve a world without leprosy. It's now up to people like us to respond. Thank you.
Many thanks. I now call on Anne McTaggart to be followed by Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And firstly, I would like to give a warm welcome to the Leprosy Mission Scotland that are based in Stirling to the Parliament tonight. I'm delighted to contribute to this debate on the work of the charities tackling the disease of leprosy. And I would also like to thank Bruce Crawford for securing parliamentary time in order to recognise the importance of World Leprosy Day, to be held on the 27th of January 2013. Leprosy is a debilitating disease affecting the lives of millions of people all over the world and devastating families who have no access to the appropriate medical treatment. Developments in modern medicine have allowed sufferers from leprosy to be cured entirely, though tragically the medical resources are too often unavailable in the areas where the disease is most prevalent. Communities across the developing world are hardest hit by leprosy, usually a cause of extreme poverty, and, if left untreated, can reduce the lifespan of a sufferer by up to 50%. The Leprosy Mission has worked to tackle the misunderstanding and stigma associated with leprosy and has raised awareness of the plight of millions of people who continue to suffer from this disease worldwide. The World Leprosy Day event will provide another platform to increase the profile of the disease and potentially secure the kind of resources that would make a difference to those without access to medical treatment, or even the knowledge that it is curable. The Scottish Leprosy Mission works internationally across 30 countries from Africa to Asia and many nations in between, with the goal of eradicating the causes and consequences of leprosy. Volunteers here in Scotland have recognised the devastating effect that this disease continues to have in the 21st century. And I am sure the entire Parliament would join me in recognising the importance of these efforts as part of the wider action to tackle poverty and disadvantage in developing nations. Of course, leprosy represents more than the disease itself and highlights the extreme poverty that so many people in developing nations endure without access to appropriate medical or financial support, even in the most pressing times of need. It is entirely unacceptable that so many individuals should suffer from curable diseases in the 21st century, and it is tragic that this suffering is compounded by the misunderstanding and stigma that still surrounds leprosy worldwide. It is through the proper support and recognition of movements such like the Scottish Leprosy Mission that the international community can make a real impact on this kind of unnecessary suffering. And I once again commend the efforts of all the activists and volunteers who have raised the profile of this disease here in Scotland and across the world. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I now call on Kenneth Gibson to be followed by Nanette Milne.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I begin by congratulating my colleague Bruce Crawford on securing this debate on the terrible disease that is leprosy and the vital work being undertaken by the Leprosy-Mission-Scotland in helping to tackle the suffering leprosy causes across the globe. To many, leprosy is an archaic disease which they may only have heard of through its depiction in popular culture. This portrayal is, of course, completely inaccurate and helps only to entrench common misconceptions and stigmas surrounding a disease which is sadly still prevalent, as we've heard, in the 20th century. Leprosy has been with us a long time. A recent study reported the discovery of a 4,000-year-old skeleton in India with hallmark ravages of disease, some 1,500 years further back than was once thought. It's now believed that the disease first appeared in the subcontinent and spread as urbanisation and trade routes grew. It was a disease once prevalent in Scotland, and of course our very own Robert the Bruce was afflicted by it. The disease is caused by the Mycobacterium leprae bacteria, which attacks and destroys nerves, particularly in peripheries of the body. Lesions in the skin are the main external symptoms of the disease and the one which most people associate leprosy with. However, left untreated, the disease can cause loss of sight, loss of feeling in the limbs and permanent disability. Although scientific understanding of the disease has improved and effective treatments have been established, the disease is sadly by no means a disease of the past, as we've already heard. In 2010, the World Health Organization reported that over 212,000 new cases of leprosy were detected. Of these, it is estimated that around half of sufferers developed irreversible deformities and/or disabilities. Failure to treat at an early stage has resulted in millions of people living across the world with the permanent effects of leprosy. The vast majority of these cases are in India and Brazil, two of the world's fastest growing economies, yet countries with deep-seated poverty. Unfortunately, due to the stigma and fear surrounding the disease, which Anne McTaggart has highlighted, many cases go unreported, and it is therefore likely that true figures are far higher than this. Beyond the physical impairments caused by leprosy, it is clear that misinformation and superstition has created a disease which is effectively a taboo subject for many. In the Middle Ages, this led to the widespread creation of leper colonies, where sufferers were segregated from society for fear of contamination. Whilst leprosy is infectious, 95% of people are naturally immune, and despite misconceptions, the disease is very difficult to contract and cannot be spread by touch. Despite this, it's appalling to note that leper colonies still exist in many countries, with 1,000 estimated to remain in India alone. We also hear heartbreaking stories of family members, young and old, being disowned and cast out of their communities for fear the condition will bring shame upon the family. Tackling this ignorance and the social segregation suffered by those who have now ended the battle with disease is surely as important as enhancing the availability of treatment against the disease itself. Whilst the situation remains very serious, it is encouraging to note that real progress has been made in recent decades. Medical advances in the late 80s and 90s found effective vaccines to fight the disease, and also saw the establishment of the multi-drug therapy regimens adopted. These advances have been hugely effective, with sufferers no longer infectious after a matter of days and free from the disease after a course of drugs lasting around 12 months. As a result of international initiatives through the World Health Organization and the United Nations, coupled with scientific advance and the hard work of charitable organisations, 108 of the 122 countries where the disease was considered endemic in 1985 have now realised this goal of eliminating leprosy. This represents tremendous progress, and it's interesting to note that many of the countries mentioned by Bruce Crawford are those where conflict prevents leprosy being adequately dealt with. The work of the Leprosy-Mission-Scotland and their endeavours to bring about a world free from leprosy has been integral to this success. Through educating people about what leprosy is and tackling the ignorance surrounding what it is not, the work of the Leprosy-Mission-Scotland continues to help remove the stigma attached to disease, encouraging those affected to seek treatment at the earliest possible opportunity. The charitable collections and membership of the Leprosy Mission International has undoubtedly improved the availability of treatment, and with around 22,000 patients affected by leprosy treated at the Leprosy Mission hospitals and tens of thousands of more people being assisted financially, have made a tremendous impact on this disease. In conclusion, whilst there is clearly more to be done to eliminate leprosy, I am hugely encouraged that medical advances improve education and the dedication of charitable organisations such as the Leprosy-Mission-Scotland will see leprosy completely eliminated and consigned to the history books where it rightly belongs. Thank you.
Many thanks. I now call on Annette Milne, after which we'll move to the Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I too welcome this debate and congratulate Bruce Crawford for bringing the issue to the Chamber this evening. Even today, for many people, leprosy is something which they associate with biblical times, when it was believed that conditions resulting in disfigurement were afflictions sent by God as punishment for sin. Similarly, people still often associate leprosy with the leper colonies which emerged in the Middle Ages, when the prevailing thinking was that this condition, which actually covered a multitude of ailments, was highly contagious. Better to ship people off to remote locations in the mountains or on islands than to risk infection. Of course, we in Scotland don't talk about leper colonies these days, but it may interest members to know that as a young medical student nearly 50 years ago on a public health scholarship to Yugoslavia, I visited what was then called the Leper Hospital in Sarajevo, thankfully the only time that I've personally seen patients suffering from the effects of leprosy. Obviously, what we could term as biblical or medieval leprosy is far removed from the modern condition, but leprosy is not yet a disease of the past, as we've heard this evening, and what is now known as Hansen's disease still affects the lives of at least 3 million people worldwide. And I have to say that that's probably a very conservative estimate when we consider how difficult it is to obtain accurate and reliable data from some of the less well-developed countries. The stark fact is that should this debate last 40 minutes, in that time 20 people will have been diagnosed as suffering from epilepsy. The motion rightly points to the work of the Leprosy-Mission-Scotland, an organisation with strong Celtic roots stretching back over a century, in tackling the stigma associated with people suffering from leprosy. The term leper is rarely used these days for obvious reasons, given its connotations with outcasts, and people suffering from leprosy should never be considered as outcasts. I note the mission's Delete the L Word campaign, which has gone some way to persuading broadcasters that it is now regarded as an offensive term. Breaking the mindset, often fuelled by fear and ignorance, that somehow leprosy sufferers pose a danger to society is at the forefront of the mission's aims and objectives. The sad fact is that in certain countries, obstacles still remain for people diagnosed with the condition. Sufferers are unable to use public transport, children are denied their education, splits occur in families if a wife is diagnosed or a child with leprosy is rejected, and employment is hard to find because of a misplaced fear of infection. The Leprosy-Mission-Scotland is an organisation dedicated to eradicating the condition in many countries across Africa, South Asia and Southeast Asia through various programmes, including treatment and general health care, prevention of disability by teaching people self-care, hospital treatment in clean environments where ulcers are treated, surgeries undertaken and intensive physiotherapy sessions take place. And community rehabilitation is important too. The work of the Leprosy-Mission-Scotland is driven by gospel teaching, compassion and prayer, and the 4,000 individuals in 350 churches and groups in Scotland who give up their time and effort to the eradication of leprosy are example to us all of the true meaning of voluntary service. Although the Leprosy-Mission-Scotland is based in Stirling, its work is carried out across the country, and as a North East MSP, I was interested to learn of the work of the mission's Aberdeen Area Committee, which through coffee mornings and events in local churches has raised over £60,000 since the late 1990s for leprosy projects across the world, their most recent work being in Angola. Presiding Officer, this Sunday is World Leprosy Day, and I think the message that we should keep at the forefront of our minds is that leprosy is and still remains a 21st century problem. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Many thanks. I now call on the Minister to wind up the debate. Minister Humza Yousaf, 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm very pleased to have the chance to offer some closing remark in today's members' debate. Some very good contributions from Bruce Crawford and McTaggart, Kenny Gibson Nanette Millen as well. All of them actually, one of the fundamental cores running through their speech being that this is not a disease of the past and very much still a 21st century problem that we must continue to try to tackle. I'll start, of course, by congratulating Bruce Crawford for getting time in the parliamentary business for this very important message. I'd also like to reiterate Bruce Crawford's welcome to the staff from the Leprosy-Mission-Scotland to the Parliament today. I'd like to thank them for their incredibly hard work. I'm very happy to support, of course, today's motion on the work of the Leprosy-Mission-Scotland and recognising the importance of World Leprosy Day and raising awareness of that condition. I had the great pleasure of visiting the Scotland versus Poverty exhibition being hosted by the Leprosy-Mission-Scotland in Stirling at their invitation and the invitation of Bruce Crawford. In the first few months of this new role, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it's new anymore, actually, coming to 6 months, but in this new-ish role, I had the pleasure of meeting Linda Todd a number of times. Presiding officer, she and her team are to be commended on the passion and the determination they display in helping some of the world's most poorest and the most vulnerable. I hope she wouldn't mind me saying that she is tenacious in taking this issue forward, ferocious in her determination to do her best in regards to the Leprosy Mission Scotland. Bruce Crawford referred to the Leprosy Mission Scotland project, which was funded by the Scottish Government, the Generating Income in Chittagong project, which has helped to improve the socio-economic status of marginalised communities, especially those, of course, that have been affected by leprosy or disability. This project has created self-help groups and provided loans and training on income-generating activities. The project also raises awareness of leprosy in sessions targeted at local communities and their leaders and relevant members of the government. And the achievements of that project have been incredibly significant. Today it's formed 75 self-help groups with 603 members, provided income-generating activity for over 500 group members. This training in agricultural methods promotes environmentally sustainable practices. The project has also granted small loans to 251 people. It has built 15 new houses in partnership with the community and held meetings for over 4,000 participants to raise awareness of disability and human rights issues. These are some huge achievements. And it's important to always remember that behind these statistics are real people whose lives have been changed for the better by this project. Projects of this size, we may not be able to single-handedly solve an enormous problem such as that of leprosy, but we do, however, have the ability to make a significant improvement for particular individuals and entire communities. We also have the opportunity to share the learning from projects such as this and to ensure that they are aligned to broader global efforts to eradicate leprosy. And I suppose in that sense, the Leprosy Mission Scotland is well placed to influence international efforts in this field as it's part of that global development organisation, the Leprosy Mission. And the holistic approach is also something that I think is worth looking at in regards to the Leprosy Mission's work that is very noteworthy. By recognising that leprosy is a disease which stigmatises, a word we heard from all of our contributors. It marginalises and it impoverishes. The Leprosy Mission considers that the need of the leprosy patient is in the round. It's holistic, not just their medical needs, but support for vocational training, rehabilitation and provision of counselling. These various measures help to return dignity to a person who's suffering from leprosy. The importance of NGOs and civil society for international development, the importance of NGOs, if they weren't there, though that holistic approach, I don't think would be taken by anybody else. So it's important to highlight that. And organisations such as the Leprosy Mission Scotland play a critical role in the fight for global justice. Such NGOs and civil society development agencies more generally are important in a number of ways. Of course, NGOs can be a lot more fleet of foot than government, who can often find it difficult. They can be genuinely quite responsive, quick to respond to the needs of citizens in partner countries. They often play a mediating or facilitating role between very excluded citizens and their states. But by helping specific individuals or communities, NGOs help to create bonds of trust, networks of cooperation, which often transcend national boundaries. When I went to visit the Scotland versus Poverty exhibition in Stirling, I saw a number of colleagues that performed the Leprosy Mission across the world who'd come to Scotland very brave to have come to Scotland towards the end of the year as well, but they came to Scotland, and that showed how that national network, that network of cooperation, does truly transcend national boundaries. I believe it's critical that we support and we bolster such links through our approach to international development rather than try to work around them. The civil society organisations and NGOs are important in other ways. It's often the case that those who are motivated by compassion for others, including, of course, those people of faith, they are moved over time to consider why things are as they are. People ask why, and it's been brought up in these contributions, people ask why, for example, tropical diseases such as leprosy persist, despite the fact that there is a curable and manageable disease. People are motivated to search for the causes of such inequalities, leading to a lifetime of engagement in development issues and fighting against global injustice. I always say, Presiding Officer, once you get yourself involved in some element of this kind of work, trying to help others, actually it's quite an infectious bug. It's very difficult to let go, and I think the dedicated team at the Leprosy-Mission Scotland show that quality with great aplomb. There is cause for optimism. I know we said that there's still much work to be done in terms of leprosy, but there is cause for optimism as leprosy can be cured, as I say, can be eradicated. And in just the last 10 years, levels of prevalence have fallen by 75%, thanks to the work of many organisations, of course, including the Leprosy Mission. And with ultimate success in sight, now is the time, I think, to redouble our efforts. Just to conclude, Presiding Officer, NGOs are also vital, I think, because they tell the world what kind of nation and what kind of country we aspire to be and that we are. The Leprosy Mission Scotland, I think, it tells the world that Scotland is a nation that's compassionate, is a nation that's caring and is ready to help the world's most vulnerable. I wish the Leprosy Mission well in their endeavours. I thank once again Bruce Crawford for bringing forward this motion. The Scottish Government stands behind the continuing global efforts to eradicate leprosy, and we look forward to the day when we can consign World Leprosy Day to the past.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And that concludes today's business. I now close this meeting of Parliament.